All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's time for DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh here. And folks, I am super psyched to have an industry legend with me once again. He's been on the show before, but it's been a while. And we're going to talk about some of the hottest topics out there, folks. We're going to talk about cyber, of course. We're going to talk about security. We're going to talk about AI. And Gen AI is very hot. Everyone's excited about it. There are some issues to deal with. We've talked about that on the show many, many times. Gen AI does hallucinate. It is generative in nature. That's a feature, not a bug. So we'll talk about dealing with that. We'll talk about the economics of where that data lives, the storage layer, and we'll also do some fun follow-ups at the end of the show today. But with that, Eric Herzog, Infinidat, welcome back to DM Radio. What's the latest? What have you been working on?
Eric, thank you very much. We love being on DM Radio. Obviously, we're on last summer, so when we got together last time. So I love being in the hot seat with you. So fire away, buddy.
All right, well, let's talk first about cyber. And every time there is an advancement made with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, being able to improve or optimize how information systems run, well, guess what? The bad guys do that stuff too. So they're very, very good. They're very clever. I learned, I guess, about a decade ago from my business partner, who's now mostly retired, British gentleman, Dr. Robin Bloor. Of course, he founded Bloor Research, and he and I founded Bloor Group together. And he's the one who really woke my mind up about this. He said the narrative in the media is this, hooded hacker, the lone hacker trying to get into your systems. He says that's just a bunch of nonsense. This is an industry. And it's an industry that another buddy of mine told me, Justin Rioch, a big open source guy, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry every year. There are many component parts to it. There are people who penetrate, there are people who sell, there are people who then buy the assets and do the ransomware. Horrible things happen, and those guys get better every day. So this is serious, serious stuff dealing with cybersecurity attacks. And you guys are now talking about cyber storage resilience and next generation data protection. So let's kind of dive into that a bit. What goes into this? What constitutes cyber storage resilience from your perspective?
So, first of all, one of the key things to recognize is many times global enterprises, the bulk of our customers are the global Fortune 2000. 28% of the Fortune 50, for example, use our technology. So, there you often have a chief security officer, right? On the IT side. So whether he reports to the legal officer, the CFO, or the CIO. But in general, enterprise storage is left out. So the first thing you need to recognize is in today's modern enterprise, you can't leave storage out. 90% of an enterprise's data is sitting on that enterprise storage.
Right.
So if you don't include that in a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy, that is basically going on vacation, not just leaving all your windows and doors unlocked, but literally wide open. And by the way, on every social media platform possible, saying, I'm going on vacation from June 1st to June
Right.
18th. My windows are open, my doors are open. You take out billboards on the couple highways near your house, and right in front of your house, there's a big giant sign that says, I'm not home, steal my stuff, doors and windows wide open. That's the problem by not including storage in a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy. So we have done that at Infinidat. We have traditional high-end enterprise storage with all the normal features on availability, reliability, on performance, on cost savings, but we've infused within that a heavy dose of cyber storage resilience and the capability of doing a recovery. The question isn't if you'll be attacked, it's when and how often. And the
Right.
odds of them eventually getting through are basically astronomical. As you pointed out, just the way IT is evolving every day, cyber criminals are doing the exact same thing. And it is a
Right.
giant industry.
Well, and I remember a few years ago now picking up on a rather disturbing trend where these bad guys would penetrate your backups. So they wouldn't go for your production system, they would go for your backup data in the storage environment. And then guess what? That troublemaker is lurking there in the background for a significant period of time. And if not enough attention is paid to that environment, they just snuck in through the back door.
Well, what we've done is infuse both into our technology that's used with our backup partners and the technologies for primary storage, our cyber technology known as InfiniSafe. So whether you use our purpose-built backup appliance, which work with all the major backup software vendors, or our primary storage products, the InfiniBox and the InfiniBox All Flash, we embed in it a ton of cyber software technology that helps you reduce the threat window and helps you recover dramatically. And in fact, we guarantee SLAs around cyber to our customers. We
Wow.
guarantee them in writing.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big deal. And you also talk about recovery first, a recovery first approach. From an architectural perspective, what does that mean?
Well, if you're going to assume that you're absolutely going to get in, okay, that they're going to cross the moat, they're crossing the giant barbed wire fence. And even though your moat has got alligators, crocodiles, and piranha, they can
Right.
swim right through it because they're protected. They've got like the force on them, so they can get through, right? In this case, it's the dark side of the force, of course.
Right.
And so, what you do is you've got to assume there will be attacks. You have to assume you need to get to it, what's referred to in the backup world as a known good copy,
Hmm.
okay, not infused with malware or ransomware, not corrupted. We have a technology which we call InfiniSafe cyber detection, which helps you do that by scanning, okay, to see if there's malware or ransomware. And you need to have that recovery once you have the good copy be near instantaneous. So, for example, on our primary storage products, the InfiniBox and the all flash version of the InfiniBox, we will recover any data set size, petabytes of data in 1 minute or less, and we guarantee that in writing. So, as
Wow.
an example, we did a cyber webinar at the end of Q4, and because I'm an old geese bag, we only do demos live. Yes, it's recorded now, but if you were on that webinar that day, the demo was live because if you can't
Wow.
demo your products are lousy. So, and video is just a way to fake it.
That's a
So we
quote.
do it real. So we do the demos live. We recovered 4 petabytes in 4 seconds on an InfiniBox of primary storage.
Wow.
We also guarantee it, as you pointed out, the smart cyber criminal is going after primary storage and backup storage. Otherwise, when they send the ransom note, the CEO calls the CIO and he says, "Oh, all we got to do is go to the backup copy. That's from a couple hours ago or from last night. Yeah, we lost some data in between, but boom, you go back." So cyber criminals are not like out of some mafia movie,
Right.
right? They are sophisticated, well educated. They understand data flows and how the enterprise works. They go after the backup side and the primary storage side. So we do have a recovery guarantee on primary, we talked about 1 minute or less. On the backup side, the recovery is 20 minutes or less. So in that
Hmm.
same webinar, and we work with all the major, high-end backup guys, Veeam, Commvault, Veritas, IBM Protect, Zerto, you name it, we work with it. So we recovered a backup data set of Veeam, 25 and a half petabytes backup repository in 12 minutes and 11 seconds. The guarantee is 20 minutes or less. So on primary storage, 1 minute or less, no matter how big the data is. And on the backup side, 20 minutes or less. Again, primary storage, we did 4 petabytes, 4 seconds. On backup secondary storage, if you will, we did 25 and a half petabytes in 12 minutes and 11 seconds. So that's why you need recovery. So you need to think about cyber storage resilience, okay, how you resist, right? But then also cyber storage recovery. They're going to get through. So how fast can I get up and going with a good copy of data? That's
Hmm.
really important.
And if could you get into the weeds a bit about how that happens? Because, there are network bandwidth issues at large organizations, there are compute issues, there are all kinds of things that come into play
Yeah.
to disrupt the status flow, if you will. I just made up that term. The status flow, I like that. But the flow of information. So how do you actually move that much data that fast? I presume it's parallelized, or can you get into the weeds a
Well,
bit?
no, no. So what we do is we guarantee that on the storage device itself. If there's a breakdown in the network between the storage and the primary servers, we can't control that, right? That's the networking guys.
I
But we will
see.
guarantee the recovery from storage to storage, and you can then, as long as the network's up and running, then it's available to the servers right away.
That's
Okay.
amazing.
If the network goes down, that's Cisco or Juniper or any of the number of network vendors that they use. So I can't control that. But what I
Right.
can do is make sure that when there's a copy and it's deemed good, right, and you scan it, and we are in, as I mentioned, our InfiniSafe cyber detection can be used to scan for malware and ransomware. It uses AI and ML technology, machine learning technology, so that it can identify malware or ransomware. Uh, One of the storage industry analysts did a validation of it. 99.99% effective. So there could be
Wow.
a false positive periodically or a false negative, but in general, it's 99.99% effective. So that is the kind of thing you want. And when you have that known good copy, 1 minute or less on primary storage and 20 minutes or less when it's the backup side. So
Yeah.
that's what we guarantee in writing. And we do that for all of our customers.
Yeah, and you talk, I mean, so some of the component parts here, you talk about immutable snapshots, for example, and just to kind of help people understand, when you're doing this scanning, you're looking at a large tranche of data and you're
Yes.
saying, okay, is it exactly the same as it was before? And the technology these days in AI is so powerful, and I think that one cool thing about all these apps that we have is that you can kind of see reflections of the AI and ML in the apps. Like, for example, when Shazam came out, and all of a sudden you can hold it up to your speaker as the song is playing, and it goes, "Bing! This is that song." It's got an algorithm that understands the signature. So it's kind of, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's kind of the same in that you look at this snapshot. How do you know it's the same? Well, because you're looking at the profile, you're looking at the signature, the topography of this piece of information. Is it like it was? If the answer is yes, we're a go, right?
Well, when we do our InfiniSafe cyber detection, we actually look at the metadata. Metadata is information about data.
Mm-hmm.
We also actually look inside of the file
Mm-hmm.
because you're looking for minute changes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Remember, cyber criminals are not King Kong or Godzilla screeching at the top of their lungs. They're the ultimate Jason Bourne. And as you remember, in the first Jason Bourne movie, Jason Bourne didn't even realize what a great spy he was. And he was
Right.
still a great spy. Remember, he had amnesia. He still was a great spy.
That's
He's doing
funny.
all spy stuff, and he's thinking, "How do I know all this spy stuff?" Didn't even know.
That's
Even
funny.
faked out himself. And that's how
Wow.
cyber criminals operate. So basically, we need to crack open the file and examine the file to see changes. Obviously, the most common way to do things, whether it be ransomware or malware, is to very surreptitiously encrypt data, tiny slivers at a time. And when you
Mm-hmm.
do that, they can hold you for ransom,
Right.
right? Or they can destroy you. And either is clearly bad, as you know, whether it be in the U.S., the EU, the UK, Japan, all have now cybersecurity regulations that publicly traded companies must adhere to. And
Right.
in fact, we did a webinar probably now about a month ago. We literally ran through from a government perspective what are the regulations that impact storage and how do they work and what do they do. So we did that as a webinar where we didn't talk necessarily about InfiniSafe for our cyber. We literally talked about here's the regulations in the US, here's SEC, here's this. Here's regulations in the EU, NIS2, DORA, and kind of walk through those. So that's what we did from that perspective, and it's a very big issue, and it is something that impacts companies not just at the tactical level,
Mm-hmm.
but at the strategic level. If you take a look at CEO surveys with all the travails of the world, and they almost, I hate to say it, daily seem to be getting worse and worse. Despite all that, cybersecurity is one of the top three in every CEO survey, every
Sure.
CEO survey. And at the end of last year, very end of the year, and in early Q1 in January, some of the leading global IT analyst firms did surveys of CIOs. The number one projected purchase was cybersecurity technology.
Mm.
Number one. AI was a close number two, but cybersecurity was number one. Because they're all getting attacked. The average number of attacks on an enterprise per week is over 1,650 every week. Every week.
That's
And
crazy.
that's the average. So that means some are less, right? There are,
Yeah, right.
but others might be getting 4 to 5,000 attacks. So it's a big, big, serious issue. And the CEOs care about it because the CEO surveys have talked about it, even though the other travails, economic and other. And the CIOs in those surveys, number one intent to purchase was cybersecurity. Number two was AI technology. So
Mm.
those are the big trends that you see from an overall perspective in the IT enterprise community.
Right. Well, and I learned a long time ago that security is not one thing. There was a guy who gave a talk in Malaysia, of an incredibly intelligent Indian gentleman, and he had this great expression. He was like trying to explain his point. He said, "So basically, lunch is not a food." And I laughed because I immediately got what he was saying. Lunch is an event at which you can have any number of food types, right?
Right.
And he's saying security is not a thing. Security is a profile, it's training, it's technology, it's processes, it's methodology, it's models and algorithms, it's all these things coming together. And there are lots of key components. I mean, not changing passwords, yes, it matters. Change your passwords. That's why all these systems force you to do that. But there are other really important things too. We talked about a couple, like immutable snapshots, but like logical air gapping, for example. Can you explain to the audience what that means?
Sure. So when you look at what we call the cyber stack, it has five elements. Immutable snapshots we talked about. Second thing is logical air gapping, which you can do locally, remotely, or both. And what that does is separate the management plane of the storage from the data plane of the storage. Okay. The third element is a fenced forensic environment. So they've gotten through, you need to test. So you need to fence an environment because it could be attacked as well, right? Because the attack could still be going on. Just create a fenced environment. And then you take your snapshots, right? And put it in there and scan it with our cyber detection. Or you could get the application owners to come take a look at it, right? The Oracle guy, the Mongo guy, the SAP guy, the various IT teams to take a look to see if they see malware or ransomware. Obviously, then we have our guarantees, which we include as part of the stack. Those are all free. And then we also include, you talked about how it needs to be lunch, the salad, the main course, the
Right.
dessert, the starch, the drink, okay, all kinds of things. And you could have, for Father's Day recently, dim sum, that was Chinese food. You could have Mexican food for lunch. You could have Indian food for lunch. You could
Right.
grab a burger for lunch. You could just eat fruit for lunch. It's
Right.
still lunch, but there's all those components.
Yeah.
So the other component, and this really gets to having things meld together, is what we call automated cyber protection, which allows our cyber software on the storage side to communicate with cybersecurity software packages that
Hmm.
they buy. So when you look at the cybersecurity software packages, something like Microsoft Sentinel or Splunk,
Right.
they do not look at storage. So if
Hmm.
they sense a cyber attack, they can send a note through an API to our software and we'll automatically start taking action on the storage. So
That's
that's an integration of the cybersecurity side and the
right.
storage side, making them work as a team to fight cyber threats.
That's awesome. And folks, don't touch that. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, talking all things cyber, talking all things AI today with Eric Herzog. You can catch his writings on Forbes. He also has a blog on the Infinidat website, so be sure to check all that out. This guy's been around for a while. I don't want to date him, but he's been around for a while, and he's seen the evolution of these technologies. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Some of the same problems we had 20 years ago, we still have. There are still issues. AI, in a way, has optimized certain things, but it's also complicated certain things. And certainly, this Gen AI stuff, which is absolutely fascinating. I love Gen AI. I'm amazed by it. I use it all the time, but it is probabilistic in nature. And so, I've mentioned to some folks on the show, I had this epiphany a while ago, and we'll get into the details. But Eric, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I thought I just because I'm a data guy and I come from a data background. So data warehousing, data lakes, analytics, all the stuff that feeds AI algorithms from the structured side, like that's my history. And if you think about information systems, we've spent the last 50 years or more really perfecting the foundation of information systems, which is the database. We made it faster, able to handle more concurrent users, more performance, failover, all sorts of improvements, connectors, etc. But one thing was never in question, and that was accuracy. You always got out of the database what you put into the database. It's like table stakes. No one even questioned that ever. Now, with Gen AI, it's like you throw this noise filter on the end of this pristine half century process because it's probabilistic. It hallucinates, it comes up with things on its own. I just find that fascinating that all of a sudden we're now in a sort of rear guard strategy of, okay, how do we tame this beast that we've now unleashed? And of course, we want to unleash it because it's so powerful, because it's so good at reflecting back patterns, but it is also it's a consensus engine. Large language models are consensus engines, and they're lossy because they take images or sound or video or whatever, and they convert it to vectors. because you can't crunch letters and you can't crunch images, but you can crunch numbers. And so in the model, they crunch the numbers and then send back some reflection and output based upon your prompt and their training. Well, out of the box, they're like 80% accurate, and that sounds wow, that's great. They're 80% accurate. So what part of your business can be wrong 20% of the time? And the answer is like nothing. But I'll just throw that over to you as a lead up, Eric. What do you think about this remarkable transformation that we're seeing and the benefits and the risks associated with that?
So let me hit the risks first. First is you get hallucinations because you often have data that's not applicable. So, and oftentimes that's because you're using an open source chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you want to do, if you're an enterprise in particular, you want to use your data. You don't want to use someone else's. You don't want to use open market. So, if I'm building things and I use screws, and let's say I'm a car guy, so I got big trucks, SUVs, pickup trucks, luxury cars, not so luxury cars, big cars, medium cars, small cars, and there are all kinds of different screws that are used. Some screws are used everywhere, but a lot of screws are not, right? They're custom. Well, you may use them in your 10 models of heavy duty truck, but you're not even going to use them in your SUVs. So if you were to use AI, you want to make sure of a couple things. A, you want it to be your data, right?
Mm-hmm.
B, you want to make sure that that data, in order to make sure you order the right screws and ship it to the right factory,
Right.
is always up to date. They're building cars and trucks every day, right? So if you're building cars and trucks every day, they have plenty of screws on Tuesday, but by Thursday they're out. So
Right.
part of the job in supply chain management is to order the screws and get the screws to the factory that's going to be out and get the right factory screws to the right place on the right time. So A, you want to make sure that your data is always changing, right? It's generative, as you've talked about. So you want to make sure that you're using internal data. You want to make sure you know where all the data is. That's another problem. Sometimes data is dispersed all over an enterprise, could be divisionalized in companies that have divisions. It could be geographically done. So there's data in Europe and there's other data sitting in the United States, even though some of the information is replicable to the other geography. So part of what you want to do with AI is make sure that A, you're not using public information, you're using your information. So you don't care about the screws that is needed by your competitor. You don't care about the screws needed to put together a home. That's not what you do. You do cars and you do your type of cars. So you want it to be your data, which will reduce hallucinations. You want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that you're always being generative because things are changing every single day. And then you want to make sure you get all the data. You don't want to leave out. If you, for example, have 12 different storage devices and that comprises all the data you need, and you forgot that a couple databases or file systems that you need are sitting on array 11 and you only do arrays 1 through 10 and array 12, then all that data on 11 is wrong. So you could A, order the wrong screws.
Mm.
B, you could send the wrong screws to the wrong place. You could send the right screws, but send them to the wrong factory. So you need to have all the data sets. It needs to be constantly generative because that's the way big enterprises work. And you want to make sure you're not using open data. You want proprietary data sets. There also, by the way, happens to be for certain use cases, such as engineering in particular. If you use it in open, you just exposed your IP. So if I
Mm-hmm.
develop the transporter beam. I am Scotty, and I just invented the freaking transporter beam, and I used open source AI to do it. All my competitors now can have transporter beams.
Right.
I can't do anything about it. So
Well,
big companies want to protect their IP as well. And by the way, when you have your own data sets, it could still have an hallucination, but the likelihood drops because you have the data sources that are under your control. As you said,
right.
your databases, your file systems, right? Your file information, your video information. So, as long as that's accurate, the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. But assuming that data is accurate, then by using the right generative AI proprietary to your company, the odds of getting your AI workloads right and not having lots of hallucinations and not shipping the wrong screws to the wrong factory on the wrong day and all of those nuances, that's where AI can really be effective. And whether that be
Yeah.
supply chain, finance, right? Anywhere you want to use it, tech support issues. Yeah, if you've got a tech support problem and let's say you're B2C, and so you're dealing with consumers, they got a problem, and you call Eric Kavanagh, he goes, That's not the product I have. I called about the Hinkelmeyer. You're talking about the Bleep store, and you're already mad.
Right.
I'm canceling my order. I'm never going to buy from Zoggin store again, ever. Your tech support is horrible. Never going to buy from you. So that's the kind of stuff that, if you use open source and get a lot of hallucination, but when you have it internally, I know that Eric Kavanagh called because all my calls that come in are in a master database. If you call 3 days in a row, I know you called 3 days in a row.
Right.
Maybe you called on three different products. Maybe you love
Right.
my company and for some reason you're having little problems with them. Okay, great. If you're calling 3 times on the same product, that's probably not a good thing.
Right.
And if I call you and don't know that you called me, I look like I'm not doing a good job of the customer experience. So
Right.
those are things that, and AI can help with all that, but you got to have all the data. It's got to be generative. You don't want to use open source because you don't. By the way, do you want to expose that you have a lot of tech support calls on your Hinkelmeyer
Right.
so that other people who make Hinkelmeyers are out there running ads on TV? Hey, the Zoggin store Hinkelmeyer is a piece of poop. By the way, look at this Gen AI thing about 12,474 calls in 2 hours,
Right.
right? And that's the stuff that comes out. That's your private IP. But if you go with open source AI, then that legally is now the data you just did is now available to anybody, including your
Yeah.
competition. So those are things you need to do to make AI work well for you as a company and deliver the results you want without lots of hallucinations and really be effective at complementing the human mind because AI is not to run us, AI is to
That's
complement us.
That's right. I'm really glad you said that because I just came back from San Francisco at the Databricks Summit, which was amazing. And all around San Francisco are these billboards, stop hiring humans, hire agents, and all this nonsense. And I'm thinking, what are you guys smoking? I mean, to
Well,
your
you know what? Those are guys that love the Terminator. They love Skynet,
right,
right? They love iRobot with that giant, what looks to be a quantum computer like thing, Vicky, who turns evil.
right,
So, AI is to complement humanity.
right,
Printing press complemented humanity.
right.
The train complemented humanity.
That's right.
The airplane, right? All these inventions, think drug cures, right? These are all, but AI is not to run us. We're to run AI and use it as a tool,
That's
just the
right.
way cavemen used to use a frickin' stone axe.
That's right. Yeah, I actually just referenced ages, Stone Age, Bronze Age, the Iron Age, all this stuff, and then the Information Age. And guess what? This is the AI age. We are entering an epoch right now. It's starting right now, and you can see it. And so the companies that are positioned to leverage this technology are going to do very well. The companies that are not positioned are going to have a real hard time. It's like being in a race, like a Formula One race, and you didn't put the rear tires on properly before the race began. Well, guess what? You just lost a lap or two laps to the other guys. And that preparation is on the data side. So this is where a company like Infinidat comes into play. Storage is where your data is kept. I mean, that's where the vast majority of your data is kept. Yeah, there's some streaming architectures and some other things going on, but eventually the data gets persisted. And to your point, I'm glad you brought this up. Recency. You want the latest data, you want the freshest data, and then you can use Gen AI in all kinds of really creative ways. For example, you mentioned a call center. Gen AI can be in the background scanning, pulling information, even as a person is talking to you and taking a real-time transcript and go, aha, suggest this, aha, suggest that. It can notice things, and we talked about this before the show. It can also understand sentiments. I can tell that Bob is PO'd right now. So it's like, give him an offer, give him this. But the human still needs to be the person to absorb the recommendations during the call and then take that action. But it's informed action now as opposed to blind action, right?
Well, at Infinidat, we've taken that to mind. So we have created an AI RAG architecture. It'll work with any large language model, small language model, any vector database, and it allows you to use your existing Infinidat storage. It supports what's called the NFS protocol, which is what files are,
Hmm.
but all the database guys, Oracle, SQL, right? They all support NFS as well. So you can look at file data. You can look at what database data is called block data. You can grab all that data. It's designed to run on-prem. Now we do have a cloud edition of our product called InfuseOS Cloud Edition, which allows you to put essentially our storage box in the cloud
Hmm.
software. So you can use the cloud that way, but you're not using open source information, using your information that you stuck in the cloud
Right.
for on-premise information, and we even work with our competitors' gear. So as long as that competitor, if it's got information on the screws, two databases, and files that you need to get the right screws to the right place at the right time, as long as we can see an NFS data exposed, they just need to say it's over on this other product that's not yours. And our reference architecture, our AI RAG, will allow all that to be pulled.
Hmm.
And the idea is it supports, of course, agentic constant change because our customers are, again, mostly the global Fortune 2000. So the idea here is you create a system that allows you to use their existing storage. They could use our cloud edition. You don't want to grab generic cloud data because that usually means it's open source. And you could use competitive products to us that do storage as long as they support what's known as the NFS protocol. And then that can all be teed up and fed into your LLM or your SLM, into your vector databases, and it will do it all the time. If you tell it to
Hmm.
run 24 by 7 by 365, it
Right.
will run 24 by 7 by 365. So
Right.
as your needs change for the screws factory by factory, or you come up with a brand new truck that you've never had, or you redesign the truck, or redesign the SUV, or redesign the car so it's different enough that now it uses different screws. I have a Jeep, for example, that has a soft top. And in 2018, they significantly redesigned it. And now it's way easier to take the top off than it used to be in
Hmm.
my 2010, my 2012, all the way back to my 1995 model. It was hard to get those soft. I mean, it was cool and you thought it was cool and everyone go, God, it's cool that you have a soft top. But boy, was it hard to do. Now it's easy. But they
Hmm.
changed that. That means there's new parts. It doesn't look the same when you're inside. You can see different brackets, different braces between a 2017 and a 2018. You
Wow.
can see that. So I need to order all those right parts. So by having it constantly updating, pulling the data, right? The databases, the files, all the changes, making sure you grab all that data. You can use your existing Infinidat storage. You can use Infinidat storage in the cloud, and you could use competitors to us. And then you grab it all, and then it constantly feeds it in. So that's how you stay in tune and how you use AI properly. And hallucinations can be a real problem,
Right.
right? And
Right. Well, because trust is paramount. And
right.
if trust is broken, the people just go a different direction. We only got about a minute left in this segment, but I think you were alluding to Infinibox. And can you
Yes.
talk about that real quick and how, because AI workloads are very different from traditional OLTP style workloads, and that you need a different architecture to handle that real quick, like 40 seconds.
So the Infinibox is just our high-end storage system. It uses that AI reference architecture. Our box is exceedingly fast because you need very fast storage to do AI. So that's what we do. And by the way, it's very fast for traditional workloads like Oracle or SQL or SAP as well. But it happens to be also very good because it's very high performance, which is what you need with AI solutions.
Yeah, and the AI workloads are taking the world by storm. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about Elon Musk and his new data center in Nashville and some of the cool stuff that they're doing there. There's all this work on data centers. I heard just today, this morning, in fact, that Texas is passing a law that says if you're going to build a data center, you need to bring the power with you. So it's like data and power are two peas in the same pod. You need the energy if you're going to build a data center. You cannot be sucking off the grid. But folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back with Eric Herzog of Infinidat. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio with the one and only Eric Herzog of Infinidat. We're talking about cybersecurity, AI. Let's talk about the money side of the equation, Eric. The economics of storage and the economics of power and power consumption. I mentioned there's this new law coming in Texas. I think it's in the Senate today, as a matter of fact, if my friend is correct, saying that if you're going to build a data center, you need to plan for where you're going to get that power. And it's kind of fun because what's old is new again. If you go back into the early days of the Industrial Revolution, factories would generate their own power. They would have, coal plants and things like in the factory before we were on the grid. And frankly, I think that we've had some lessons learned in the recent past, and we got to get off the grid, or at least have alternatives to the grid. Because it's just it's so vulnerable, and we're very dependent upon energy in this country, as are people all around the world. It's a big issue. It needs to be addressed, and you have a story to tell there. Let's talk about efficiency of storage, efficiency of these environments, which brings in power as well. Go ahead.
So when you think about a data center, it consumes ungodly amounts of power. In fact, all the data centers in the world, and although this sounds like a low number, it's not. 5% of all power needed on this planet is consumed just by data centers. So forget the
Wow.
cars, the factories, your home, the offices, 5% just for data centers. And
Wow.
it's growing because of AI demanding so much more compute power and so much more storage capability. So what you need to do is leverage your storage systems to get better power utilization. That better power utilization gives you a couple of advantages. One, it reduces your operational expenses. Storage requires power and cooling requires power, right? So you have power to run the storage, but then you have to cool it, and that requires power from a cooling perspective. So it's a dual-edged sword, and you basically are paying two times, but they're not two times for the same thing. So what you want to do is have very energy efficient storage to help reduce that. Then the thing you want to do, and this is pretty difficult, is you want to be able to have storage systems that can consolidate. So let's give you an example. We have a Fortune 100 customer here in the United States. They had 288 floor tiles of their data center dedicated to someone else's storage,
Hmm.
running X number of applications and workloads. They switched to us. They've gone from 288 floor tiles of a data center to 61,
Wow.
288 to 61. So,
Jeez.
how did that benefit them? A, it dramatically reduced their power budget for storage anyway. It dramatically reduced the cooling budget for storage. It also, by the way, has a sidebar impact is it takes way less people to manage 61 floor tiles than 288 floor tiles.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is on, in this case, on the IT resource budget and the IT manpower budget. And as you may have reported on in some of your other segments, right now in the IT world, there's an IT skills gap. So if you need 10 guys to manage the storage in your enterprise, and if you consolidate, you can cut that to 4 or 5. You can take those other 5 people and have them do other IT projects because there was a skills gap in IT. In fact, in the US last year, it was projected that of all the IT openings, 28% of them were not going to be able to be filled because there was no human being qualified to do it. Right. So that's one of the issues. So by having the right kind of storage, you get this power reduction. By the way, as a sidebar, and some companies don't care, other companies it's super important, is green IT. There's a perception that green IT is more expensive. Poppycock. Green IT is less expensive. 61 floor tiles compared to 288 floor tiles. Reduction in power, reduction in cooling, reduction in the OpEx to manage that, reduction in the humans required to manage that storage. And when you have to recycle, and as you know well, all computer equipment, storage, servers, networks, anything, your laptop is filled with toxic chemicals. So this is not recycling your bottles and cans. This is heavy duty stuff, and it requires specialized recycling capabilities. Well, you don't think they're going to charge the company for that? Of course they do. Do they pick up your bottles and cans for free? Of course they do, because it's easy. But recycling toxic chemicals ain't easy. So if you can go from 288 floor tiles to 61, so when you had 288 floor tiles, as you recycle that, you're recycling and have this huge, not only green impact of 288 toxic things being recycled, but you also have the cost. Now you have 61 of our stuff. When they go to the next generation, which by the way, they're in the process of doing, they will only need to recycle 61 floor tiles of toxic chemicals. So that's greener. Not that toxic chemicals are good, but it's less. And guess what? It's way less expensive for them. So having good power capability, having the ability to consolidate tons of workloads into less physical space gives you a green IT message, but it translates into OpEx savings, CapEx savings, and ongoing IT operational resources. So it helps you solve the power problem, and the power problem is huge. You also, of course, want to design every generation more efficient power. So,
Right.
for example, we introduced our what we call the G4. That's our latest version. We introduced it last May, and we are 20% more power efficient in everything we use, whether that be the
Wow.
power supplies, the fans, the processors, right? This chips we use, 20% more effective. Now, of course, because it's even faster, you can consolidate even more. So instead of going from 288 floor tiles to 61, which was with our third generation, maybe they could go from 288 to 50
Right.
because it's so much faster, right? And that means better consolidation capability. But again, and then those 50 floor tiles are more power efficient as a single floor tile. So you want to design in power reduction technology every generation of your new system products. And that's not a storage only statement. That's a server statement. That's a network statement. That's laptop statements, anything. So that's what you want to do from an IT perspective. And doing that right across your infrastructure, including storage, allows you to not only reduce CapEx and OpEx, reduce power and cooling, which is important so you can spend the power on something else, and it gives you green IT. So green
Hmm.
IT, we call it E squared. Environmental advantage equals economic advantage.
Oh, I like that. That's clever. Well, and it's also simplicity. Complexity is the silent killer of information systems. It hurts morale, it slows things down, it causes all sorts of trouble throughout the workflow, throughout the day-to-day activities of your team. And I've long evangelized that morale is the most important characteristic of any organization. And so if you simplify, if you make life easier on your teams, on your people, you're going to get added value because one of the cool things about AI and what it can do these days, these models, and not just these large language models, foundation models, all kinds of even old fashioned, I like to joke, old fashioned machine learning models, is we can learn how to optimize our information architecture. We can learn how to optimize our business processes. I mean, there are really, really cool things happening in that space. It all starts with the data. It all starts with being able to get the data quickly because, when something is hard to do, when there are friction points, people are less likely to go down that path. People are like water. They follow the path of least resistance usually. Now, innovators can swim upstream and figure out new things and new ways of doing things and kind of suffer the slings and arrows of the status quo. But if you can grease those tracks and give your team what they need to think and to ideate and give them the psychological security to do new things, that's when you come up with big innovations. What do you think?
Well, agreed. It's all about getting everything to work together. It's teamwork. The server
Hmm.
guys, the storage guys, the network guys, the application guys, the guys who manage the regular data center all need to work together, whether that be cybersecurity, which we talked about earlier, whether that be AI. If they don't work together, it causes real issues. And guess what? The outcome is wrong. So the
Right.
CIO is in trouble, the CEO is upset, right? You have a cyber attack that cost, as you may remember, in Q1 of last year, there was a cyber attack, publicly traded company. The SEC now requires you to report. That cyber attack cost them $1.9 billion in their SEC filing.
Oh,
So if everyone
jeez.
had worked together between the security team, the storage team, the laptop team, all these teams that work together, maybe they wouldn't have had an attack, or maybe it only would have been half a billion,
Right.
right? These
Oh,
things are expensive. So everything from the power budget, the AI budget, everything, as you work together and do, the right level of consolidation, right level of teamwork, you end up having a more secure data center, a more power efficient data center, one where
right.
AI can flourish, right? Because remember, the storage on the AI side, we're grabbing it from multiple locations. So if you don't even know where your data is, which is not a storage issue, that's a understanding where you've got your applications and your workloads, then the
Right.
storage can't solve that problem for you. It's going to
Right.
grab data from where you tell it to go grab it from.
That's
And
funny.
we do it very, very well. So that's how this getting everything to work together, as you pointed out, is critical in a data center environment. Critical, critical for all the applications and workloads.
Yeah, I get it. I completely get it. Well, we got our podcast bonus segment coming up next, folks. Talking to Eric Herzog of Infinidat. Look him up on LinkedIn. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on DM Radio with Eric Herzog of Infinidat. And we're talking about really the foundation of AI. A lot of people get excited about the algorithms, and there's no doubt that they are fascinating. There's amazing stuff happening right now. We've actually learned a few tricks in the recent couple of weeks working for an amazing new client of ours. I'll share that with you all at some point in time soon. But we've learned about how to attract the attention of ChatGPT, and that's like basically the holy grail these days. But one of the ways you can do that is if you have your data. And as Eric has mentioned, you don't want to just trust these generic open source models for whatever information they've gathered. It can be very useful for certain things, but when you're building your RAG architecture, and personally, I'm a big fan of the what they call graph RAG. So first you build a knowledge graph on top of your information systems, then maybe you've got MCP, then you've got the large language model, because then you've got a nice architecture and a nice throughway and you've protected your IP. Because I got to tell you, folks, I've argued the age of IP is kind of ending. I mean, it's going to be difficult to manage these things and to defend your intellectual property when it's already everywhere. If it's already out in the public domain, it's very hard to protect that. It's very hard to do anything about it. So to think first, plan through your your programs if you want to leverage the power of AI. Listen to what Eric is saying here, Eric Herzog, about the architecture and about using your corporate data and using it in a fashion that you're not leaking it into these public models, right, Eric?
Yeah, so it's very, very important. The information you need to manage your supply chain or your finance is yours,
Right.
right? If you pull stuff publicly, and let's say you use it to do some sort of finance modeling or something and you're publicly traded, if you pull some open source stuff out there, you could be pulling information that isn't yours. Well, guess
Mm-hmm.
what? You just violated SEC and the FASB rules on accounting practices, right? It's supposed to be about
Right.
your company. So you need to make sure that the data is your data, right? And that's really important. Make sure you identify where the data is so the storage solution can do it. The storage solution doesn't identify the data, you do. So you need
Right.
to do a comprehensive search. If you're going to use it for supply chain, okay, here's all the databases that impact supply chain. Here's the one that impact logistics because part of supply chain is getting it to your factories as an example.
Right.
You want to make sure that you are accounting for that data wherever it may be. Obviously, you want to make sure that it is active all the time. I mean, unless you truly are shut down on the weekends, you need to be running all the time because
Right.
you're changing your finance, you're changing your HR, you're changing your all kinds of the functions you may use it for are changing all the time,
Right.
right? So if you have a technical support problem, we talked about that earlier about using, for tech support for AI. If you got a tech support problem that's happened 10 times, you want to make sure that the AI sees that. And the next time it comes up, says, here's the solution. And guess what? Eric Kavanagh got off the phone in 3 seconds. And he's very happy because the tech support guy knew exactly how to solve his problem right away because the AI learned. But if it doesn't grab data in real time and is always learning, 10
Right.
other people had the problem, but it isn't conveyed to Eric Kavanagh, who is the 11th caller, because the AI falls behind. So you want to make sure
Right.
you don't fall behind. You want to make sure you grab all the data that you've got inside. And it is very important from an IP perspective, which is independent of the storage. When you use open source chatbots and things like that, legally, whatever you use it for, if it exposes your IP on your new design, that's your
Wow.
fault, right? And you
Wow.
cannot patent that because you just made it public. So that's why using proprietary corporate data for your AI in a corporation is a way to do it. And it mimics open source. You have chatbots, and guess what? There are people who do LLMs, SLMs, and chatbots that are private that you license from them. Or if you have an AI team, they design their own that only you use inside your company. And then you're not worried about what happens with ChatGPT. It's a great product, but guess what? You just exposed everything legally if you use it to
Wow.
do certain things. So that's why
Wow.
using proprietary data in your own storage systems is the way to go. And obviously, there's data sitting in your server. So you got to get that all together, have it flow through your network, put together a process, use AI RAG technology from a storage perspective. And ours works with all of the LLMs, SLMs, vector data. We don't care. We work with everything. And most other systems like ours that try to do that will try to work with everything. And then you've got a nice solution with your proprietary data, always updated every day, 10 times a day, however often you're making changes in your databases or your other elements that are the source that the LLM or SLM is learning from, they're changing. Remember, the world changes. I have a master's degree in Chinese history from the University of California,
Wow.
but that's from 1983. So there's probably been a whole bunch of Chinese history between 1983 and 2024. And I haven't read that much. I've read it in the newspaper, I've read a couple books, but I'm not really like a historian anymore. If I was, I would know what's gone on between 1983 and 2024,
Wow.
2025, 2026. And by the way, in the year 10,000, they're going to look backwards and say, what was really going on in 2025? What
Right.
was really happening? Well, RAG AI is always doing this nonstop with your
Right.
own data, right? So that you're always up to speed. You always get the right financials. You'll always get the right information for your supply chain, for your
Wow.
factories, whatever you're using it for. So that's why, RAG AI is important, but it really is an issue. And in fact, there are several companies. I attended a conference from an IT analyst firm, and they had a whole day just on the legal aspects of AI, just
Wow.
on legal. And
Yeah.
everyone who was presenting was an attorney.
Wow.
We're not CIOs. Well, actually, that's true. There's one or two CIOs who were talking about, oh yeah, and see this guy over here, we had to hire him to help us because we really want to do AI. And then he pointed out, this is illegal, that's illegal, this is regulated, that's
Oh,
regulated,
no.
and so now he goes, our AI works great. We don't have to worry about being sued. That's
Wow.
what one of the CIOs said in that at that IT analyst conference. So that's why you got to make sure you do it right. It has a financial impact. It could have a legal impact, which is definitely what you don't want.
Right.
All these things give you a better solution to better utilize AI. AI is a tool for you to manage. Don't let it run you. And God forbid you don't want it to be doing the wrong things because that can drive you bankrupt.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. And AI agents have agency, which means they can take decisions on their own. So you better watch those little buggers. Keep your tabs on it. Pay attention to what they're doing. Monitor, manage, ongoing all the time. Folks, look this gentleman up online, Eric Herzog, Herzog of Infinidat. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to DM Radio.